Hi, Mark.
Hi, Brent.
We are back with the Two Stewards show. You feeling good?
I'm feeling pretty good. How
Okay,
you feeling?
good. This time we're going to start off with a story.
Oh, are we? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So, because we talked about long-term tenant screening and we talked about short-term tenant screening, and this is mid-term tenant screening. I don't have any story actually, but I do have a story that's kind of related.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
someone I know, they were looking for a long-term rental.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's pretty common, right? People trying to find a place to live. And they found something online, so they went to go and have a viewing. And they went to go do the viewing, and everything went really well. And the person showing the place was like, you know what? You guys seem like great tenants. And this is a long-term rental, right? So they have to give the application. So they get the application filled out and submitted. And then usually with long-term rentals, there's a deposit.
Yep.
So that's fairly common. You pay first and last month's rent. So they pay their deposit. And then after they paid the deposit, they go, let's go find out, if we get the keys.
Yeah.
And they show up at the place and nobody's there. And then they subsequently find out that it was somebody who scammed them, who had rented the place on Airbnb as a short-term rental and spent his weekend posting it as a long-term rental and taking people's deposits.
Oh, man.
So I think he scammed a number of people, and I don't know what ended up happening with him, but an example of short-term rental meets long-term rental. So is that what midterm rentals are all about?
No.
Be careful out there, folks, when you're shopping around. You should almost, as a tenant, look for landlord screening.
Yeah, I was going to say that. You not only screen your tenants get screened, but landlords should get screened as well.
Yeah.
Which is a valid point.
Yeah.
If you are renting, look up your landlord and ask some questions.
See if that's legit. Okay, so we want to jump into midterm tenant screening. Not to scare everyone off the top with horror stories, but these things do happen, so be vigilant. What exactly is midterm rentals? What is different about screening tenants for midterm rentals versus short-term rentals? Are they not the same thing?
Right there.
You're
not
yawning.
the same thing.
Am I boring you already?
Yeah, you're keeping me up here. Okay.
Drink some Coke.
Already. It's not working. Yeah. So the type of guests that you will get or that you should be looking for, anyways, for a midterm rental are different than those for a short-term rental. And so there's a few different categories, and this kind of determines what you're doing for screening. Right. So the people you're basically with midterm rental, and let's define that first. So that is anything usually over 30 days and less than a year.
Right.
And it could be 28 days or 29. So one of the big drivers for midterm rentals is legislation. So most municipalities now have some kind of legislation in place that restrict short-term rentals
because they're so popular.
Because they're so popular, and it is a way for politicians to say that they're doing something about the housing crisis. No, I know it sounds very cynical,
yeah,
but it's low-hanging fruit, right? They can say, oh, Airbnb is ruining our city. And I've heard this a number of times. And for the most part, it's not true, right? There have been some major cities like Paris and Rome where Airbnb kind of ran, and short-term rentals in general ran unbridled and took up a huge percentage of the housing space. But, if you don't live in Paris or Rome, that's probably not happening. And so we looked at it in Hamilton. It was less than 1% of the available housing supply was short-term rentals, right? So not having a material impact on housing affordability or rental rates or any of that stuff, right? There's all the stuff we've talked about previously, inflation, monetary policy, all this stuff are contributors to housing unaffordability, right? It's the government doing this, not small-time investors. But The
So
point
we
is,
should title this episode "Government is Bad."
we should title every episode. You name the podcast. No, but the point is, there's a lot of legislation
Welcome
in
back to
most
the Government is Bad
jurisdictions
podcast.
in Canada anyway, in Ontario anyways, that restricts short-term rentals in some capacity. And one of the things that they use to define a short-term rental is a stay of, and it'll vary, but 28 or 29 or 30 days or less. So then midterm is anything that is sort of above that. And we, a few years ago, we kind of thought we invented the term midterm rentals.
Yeah.
And the whole concept till we realized that no, other people are doing it too.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
we're trying to bring it into the popular, the parlance,
Right.
I guess. But it's a stay of 30 days or more. And that's kind of the I guess the definition.
Okay,
of,
but the
midterm.
tenants themselves, like, who are these people? How are they different? Like, short term is a tourist, vacation, whatever, in and out, and long term is I need a place to live. Is this where I want to live?
It varies. So what you want from a landlord perspective, or from a host perspective, we're still on that sort of host-guest mindset, is you want someone who's got a really good reason to leave. You're not necessarily looking for someone who's got a good reason to stay. That's
interesting.
That is short-term, right? You're evaluating why people want to stay, and because of the pricing and a number of things, it's not feasible for them to overstay their welcome. But with midterm, there's more of a chance that people could overstay their welcome. And this is generally the biggest fear that people have when we talk about midterm rentals. They're saying, oh, it's over 30 days. That means we're subject to landlord-tenant board rules, which is not necessarily true. But that's what people think of when they're talking about midterm rentals. So with that in mind, we want people who have basically a clearly defined goal of like what they're doing here and when they're going to leave and like why they're going to leave. So some examples would be somebody renovating their house.
Okay.
Right. So they're doing a major reno. They need to be out for a month or 2 or 3 months, depending on which contractor you use.
4 or 5 or we'll get there. I promise.
And we usually will block off extra time if we know that they're doing a reno, because invariably they go over over time and over budget. But so they have a good reason to leave because
they own a house.
They own a house. They're making that house nicer. They want to get back in there. Yeah. Also, they're paying a premium over long-term rent to live where they are, right? So they don't want to be, if they're paying, let's say $5,000 a month to rent a place, they don't want to stay there longer than they need to because that's, more money out the door.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? So, and there's a couple of unspoken things in here. These are homeowners, and that's our preferred guest actually is a homeowner. Right. So they have obligations. And, with that comes a whole set of sort of unspoken things. Yeah. Things. No, but I can't think of the word, but things about them.
Here,
right?
Let me type it into Chat GPT for a second. Another way to say things.
Thesaurus. No, but we know, okay, so if they're a homeowner, then they're probably financially responsible, financially solvent. Like, not always, especially as mortgage rates go up, but, they have the wherewithal to actually come up with a down payment, buy a house, take care of said house, right? Not, to different degrees.
They're responsible.
Generally responsible people who are going to behave in a responsible fashion and will not trash your place, will not try to take advantage of you, will not try to cheat the system because they're part of that system. They have a house and, they don't want to ruin their credit, for example. They don't want to have problems with the law, all these kind of things, right? These are all unspoken assumptions. That's the word I was looking for. That go into it. So that's the kind of guest you want because they're going to come in, they're going to pay on time, they're going to leave when they're supposed to.
I'd assume that they also kind of know a little bit about a property, like, hey, the sump pump's been running all the time or whatever, and then, this and this happened, and if this was my house, I would want to probably notify the landlord. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And sometimes they'll just, if they're there, we've had people in for a longer period of time, and they'll like take care of the place.
right,
Right? We have, obviously contracts for
Grass.
exterior maintenance and stuff.
Yeah.
But sometimes people will do it themselves, or like, hey, we cleaned all the leaves out of the yard. I'm like, oh, thank you. Right? But they're just, you get
Yeah.
people like that, right? Or like you said, if something's amiss, they notice it.
Yeah,
They're like, hey,
okay.
I've noticed the dripping sound, or I noticed this or that, where someone else, like, whatever.
yeah. So beyond people who are doing renovations in their home, like what are some maybe other categories of people?
So we're still looking, if we can, or targeting or marketing to, or hoping for. That's most of our marketing is just hoping for people.
Come and stay.
A lot of wishing and hoping. Homeowners. So people getting divorced. That's not a
Okay.
fun one, but if a marriage breaks up, people are accustomed to living in a house if they're homeowners, anyways. So they want to rent something similar, or maybe they need to have something in the same area for their kids to go to school, and
Right.
that if there's joint custody, the kids can go back and forth, and that kind of thing,
that's
right? Yeah, that's a tough one, but they need housing,
Yeah,
and they also don't need housing for a long time, right? If there's a jointly held family home, they're going to sell it, they're going to get some money, so they have some money to spend on housing for a
Yeah.
little bit of time. New immigrants is one. So this is much tougher to screen
yeah,
because they have no history, but it's also super tough for a new immigrant. And I'm not talking about refugees,
yeah,
but like people who are coming here with a bit of money. So like, if they meet the economic qualifications, right?
Yeah.
Just think you're moving to a new country and you have some money, so you're not like hard up for what you want to
Yeah.
do, where you want to stay. But, do you want to live in Hamilton? Do you want to live in Toronto? Do you want to live in Ontario?
yeah. Do you have a job, or
Do you have a
know where you
job,
wanna work?
right?
Yeah.
What are you going to do, right? So you need a little bit of time to evaluate a market to see if it's, do I want to raise kids here? Can I work here? Can I get a job,
Yeah.
start a business, all that stuff. So midterm rental is perfect for that because they can come in for a month
Right.
or, maybe extend it for a couple months
Yeah.
while they get on their feet and just sort of evaluate the
The lay of the land a little bit, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And so for them, and we've hosted a number of the immigrants, especially early on when we started doing midterm rentals.
Okay.
And it's cool,
Yeah.
because we don't meet every guest, but some of these
So-
we did.
In
get
just
to know them.
specifically with immigrants, like you mentioned, it's difficult to get some background information. Like, is there methods that you can use to screen them properly, or like how do you go about that?
So the biggest and best method we use is getting money,
Okay.
right? Like, and
So
it's a
money-
commercial lease,
Yeah.
right? It's not your standard. So don't use a standard Ontario lease.
Okay.
That's one thing I got to stress. You are setting expectations then that we are governed by landlord-tenant board. And yeah, you're over 30 days, so most people assume that this is the purview of the LTV, but it is not necessarily. And especially if you sign a commercial lease with them. And, there's stuff available online for that, or you can get a paralegal to draw one up. But, the point is, don't even set that expectation. It can be contested. And even at landlord-tenant board, like they would, is this or isn't this? But set yourself up the best way possible to start with, and that would be not with your standard Ontario lease.
Right. Which is a long-term lease agreement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that just sets the expectation that, no, you signed this lease. Obviously, you are in agreement that you're governed by the LTB, landlord-tenant
Yeah.
board.
You have no recourse.
And you have no recourse if they stop paying rent. So don't even start, whether or not you think that's the case. And I know there's a paralegal in Hamilton who has done evictions for short and midterm stays.
Okay.
And if you have that documentation, it's a lot easier to show the police, like, here's the lease.
Yeah.
And I don't want them here. They're trespassing. Please get them out. And they've done that successfully. Not always easily,
Yeah.
but successfully.
Yeah.
But so sometimes You can't do a lot of screening. You can't do a credit check. You can't
Yeah.
check their bank account. You can't check, maybe you can check bank account, but you can't do like an employer check.
Yeah.
Like if you speak, I don't know,
A different language.
Bantu or Ukrainian, maybe you can do a check on them, right? But yeah, so the biggest the biggest screening is to get some cash. But we'll generally like talk to people,
Yeah.
right? And some people are good liars and manipulators, so they may get one past you. But generally, you get kind of a feel for who they are. You can do some social media checks,
Right.
things like that, right? To see if like does everything add up,
Yeah,
right?
their
Usually, you
story.
get one or two inconsistencies, and you're like,
Well, because can someone just say they're an immigrant and you can't do any checks on me because whatever, even though they aren't? Or like, I guess that's
I mean, you could do anything,
Yeah.
right? One thing we'll do for long-term tenants and for midterm is just run their like Google them,
yeah,
but also run it through Canlii,
Okay.
Canlii.
yeah,
And that's just I can't remember what it stands for, Canadian litigation, yabba
yeah.
thing. But if they've been involved in a civil or criminal judgment, yeah, go Google your name, Brent. See what shows up. You might be surprised.
Whoa, I'm scrolling for a while here.
Their name will show up, and then if it's a common name like John Smith, you
Yeah.
might be looking for a while, right? Not
Right.
too helpful, but if it was somebody making it up, you may establish that no, they have a history in this country and they're involved in something. No,
Yeah,
you're
the
not telling
Canadian
truth.
Legal Information Institute. Okay.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
So, that's a good resource for long or midterm rentals. So, yeah, I mean, people can lie, and you gotta sometimes take a chance.
Yeah.
And like often, we're doing these as direct bookings.
Right.
Not all the time, right? We do get a number through Airbnb as well,
Yeah.
or even Booking.com, especially if they're international guests. But the biggest thing to do is make sure you get your money up front.
Yeah.
And like in advance of the stay, not like a day before, so that you're blocking off your whole calendar
Right.
when other people could be booking it, right?
Right.
So
And direct bookings means like they're contacting you directly. They're not going through Airbnb necessarily.
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I say direct booking, that means you're not using an OTA, an online travel agency. So that's Airbnb, Booking.com, VRBO,
yeah.
Expedia,
Okay.
all these types of resources. So that's new immigrants, and like we've had pretty good success with that as well, right?
Okay.
They've worked
Yeah.
out. They've worked out. Digital nomads is an increasing thing. We talked about this a little bit last episode, but
Yeah.
people who have realized they can work from anywhere in the world.
They must be happy.
I mean,
'Cause
sure.
They're not mad.
Oh no, yeah, you got me, Brent with the dad jokes
All
now.
right.
But yeah, people just moving around for work. We've seen a little bit more of that, so that's kind of neat, especially like in our area,
Yeah.
like who's coming to Hamilton. But it's nice in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe more in Niagara too, and different.
Yeah.
If you want to be in a different peaceful setting for some couple weeks to write a book or whatever.
Yeah.
Go nuts.
Yeah, exactly. And then a bigger segment that we've had is employees. So people in town for work.
Isn't like everybody an employee, or I guess
don't
some
know.
are
Are
employees.
you an employee?
Oh, employer, but
No, but people in town for work, right? And generally, what
people
it is,
renovating, people getting divorced, new immigrants, and everybody else.
and 90% of the population. No, I mean people specifically there because they are an employee, so they're in town
Right.
for a work contract, right? We've
Okay.
had like
so that like going back to your reason at the beginning, it's like they have a reason to leave.
yeah,
and
and a
the
reason
reason-
to behave.
Yeah, so their reason to show up is to work, but then they have a reason to leave. They have their job and their commitment back.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
have no like. Why would they want to stay?
Yeah,
Right?
there's no family
They don't live
here.
here. Their
Yeah.
family's somewhere else, and
Yeah.
and everything else.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a good one. And yeah, typically then their employer is paying for the lodging. Like sometimes we get people who have a per diem and they'll
Yeah.
arrange their own, but usually it's the employer. And so some hosts who lose their mind when they get a request because it's not the actual person that's staying there, right?
Yeah.
And technically with Airbnb, you can't do third-party requests.
Okay.
So like I can't book for you.
Right.
People do. But it should be you booking. And like the
Right.
reason is because they want to verify you are who you are and like do any
Yeah.
checks on you. And then if anything happens, they're going to go after you.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a third party, that's much harder to do. And so some guests or some hosts will just be like, oh, I can't deal with this. And, I look at it like their money spends just the same.
Yeah.
And there is a better chance, and this is borne out by our experience, better chance that everything's going to be good.
Yeah.
Because the employee doesn't want to jeopardize his position with the employer as well.
Yeah.
Because they're saying like, hey, this guy trashed my place. You got to hit the button. So they have a better incentive to, you might as well get the other one too, to behave and take care of the place. And, we'll have some where there's just, at the end of the stay, there's a lot of pizza boxes and beer cans and the place isn't like super clean.
Yeah.
But, we charge a cleaning fee. So whatever. As long
Yeah.
as
I mean,
it's
beer
not
cans are 10 cents a
egregious.
piece, or what are they these
Yeah,
days?
exactly. Extra income, right?
Yeah. So
So yeah, we've had a number of those as well.
drink all you want, but you have to leave the cans.
Yeah, we've had a number of those like longer stays.
Sorry, I'm going to be putting that on my pro forma when we analyze our next property.
Tenant profile must be beer drinker. Must leave cans. Yeah, well, you got to diversify your streams of income.
Yeah,
Right?
there you go. That's good.
But yeah, they've been like I said a good source of midterm, both short-term and midterm renters as well.
Okay.
And so in terms of marketing, and we talk about direct bookings, right? Especially for midterm rentals, it's important to diversify a little bit because Airbnb and the other platforms, the other OTAs, are generally geared towards short-term stays.
Okay.
Right? Long-term stays are a big, or they call them long-term stays, but really it's midterm. They're probably the biggest growing sector on Airbnb, and it's probably somewhere between 20 and 25% of all stays on Airbnb
Wow.
are now longer than 28 days. So
Okay.
like that's cool. They realize there's a market here and they're getting into it.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit the same as with the short-term rental market we talked about last time. It's self-perpetuating, right? Once the market is there, it feeds itself and it grows of its own accord.
Yeah.
So whereas short-term rentals now have, if you look at the demand for short-term rentals, let's say before Airbnb, that would have been like cottages and hotels, and it would be X amount. I don't know the actual numbers, but the industry is now bigger than it was back then with hotels and cottages. Because you would think there's only a certain amount of demand for this, right? Wherever they stay, whether it's in a hotel, if it's in a city, or a cottage, if it's outside. No, there's actually more people because the whole sector has just kind of fed itself. And once people realize that this is available, this is kind of a new thing, new money, new people come into it. And this is the same with
Right.
midterm, right? People are starting to realize that midterm is an option, whereas it really wasn't before.
Like both
Other than-
investors and tenants or
And
guests.
consumers, yeah.
Okay.
So you always had corporate rentals. That was always a thing, but that was typically like a C-level executive, right? So it'd be a
Right.
sort of a luxury type of place.
Yeah.
And whether it's a house or even like a condo, luxury condo,
Yeah.
and like higher price tag. Whereas now we open it to
Yeah.
everybody, right? And I mean, if you think about it, student rentals are actually the original midterm rental when you're looking at sort of the business case for it and revenue and rent relevance and stuff. Student rentals kind of set that example because it's a shorter, usually a year or less than a year, sometimes it's 8 months of the school year,
Yeah.
stay, and you get to up the rent every time the guest leaves.
Right. And they have a reason to leave.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're not intending to settle down right beside the university.
Exactly.
Unless they want to be a professor one day.
And then they don't want to live in student housing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, but wouldn't student housing, like, people kind of sign for multi-year things as well, like 1, 2, 3, 4 years,
They
depending?
could.
Yeah.
They could, but I mean, if you have a student house, why
8
would you?
month. Yeah. Okay.
No, do a year,
Yeah, and
and then that's it.
yeah.
And if they want to sign a new lease
then you.
at a new rate,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah. Okay.
But never lock yourself into multi-year
Yeah.
student rental, because why? Especially lately in Ontario, right? There's so many students.
Okay, so let's back up. So the guests that we've identified so far, specifically for midterm, that work really well, is people renovating their homes. So these are homeowners.
Yep.
And they're responsible people. And then homeowners who are people getting divorced.
Yep.
So they need a place to live, and it's obviously hopefully going to be short term or midterm, whatever.
Yeah.
And then they're going to move on and they sell their house and get some money. And then new immigrants, which is a great, interesting category. People trying to get their bearings straight when they come to a new country and they want to find out where they actually want to live.
Mm-hmm.
And they may or may not have a job yet. They may come with money or a certain intent, like,
Yep.
I want to do this, and then I'm going to go to school, and I'm going to do that. Then you've identified digital nomads, so people traveling, running their own business or working from home, but just working remotely, and they're here for a season while it's warm, and then it starts to snow, and they're out of here.
Yep.
And then you've mentioned employees, so generally dealing with the employer. So who is a bad tenant?
So a bad tenant would be a renter.
Okay.
Someone who just needs a place to stay.
Okay.
Right? Like why? Why are you looking for a
So somebody who's
2
currently
or
a
3 month
tenant.
stay? Well, I mean, there's usually a story, right? There's always a story.
Yeah.
And usually we find with renters who are looking, like if you're renting,
Yeah.
you want you want some stability. You want a place for a year, right?
Yeah.
If you're looking for a place for a month or 2 months, like why?
Right.
There's usually a
So
story.
you're saying
like,
people who are currently tenants or
Yeah.
who have been tenants in the past and they're looking for a new place
yeah.
and they want to stay for like 6 months. That's like a red
It's
flag.
yeah,
or
it's
is
weird,
it-
right?
okay.
Because with midterm rent, there's a premium to what you're paying for long-term rent.
Yeah.
And that could be 50 or 100%. So if your regular rent in a city for, a 2-bedroom place is $2,000 a month,
Yeah.
and you're going to pay $3,000 or $4,000, stay in mind, like why?
Right.
Right? Usually, and
Yeah.
often it's because, we got kicked out of our
Well, you
last
got
place.
some nice cutlery in your places, no? And you got Netflix.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so I mean, the places are fully furnished, the
Yeah.
utilities are included, all that stuff, but that doesn't make up the difference.
yeah, because presumably
rent.
they have all their own furniture already.
Yeah.
And yeah, so why are they paying?
Yeah, why
More.
would you want to do that?
Okay.
And and if you don't have any furniture, also why not?
Yeah.
Right?
You just
There's
sleep on the floor?
There's a lot of no, or did you have to leave your last
Right,
place,
yeah.
or
Was there a bad
was all your
situation?
furniture destroyed, or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
And there's, we've had people, usually women, getting out of an abusive relationship,
Yeah.
but that's like short term,
Yeah.
right? And if they, you kind of get the story like, hey, and that would be sometimes last minute, and often it's somebody else coming to us saying, hey, we need a place for somebody
For
like
this person. Yeah.
well, or even because sometimes it'll be through church,
yeah.
right? Where we need a place for somebody.
Yeah.
And we don't, and we'd be like, okay, that's fine. We don't need to know who,
Yeah.
especially if it's deacons or something that we've worked with or that we
Yeah.
can kind of trust, right? We got a place.
Yeah.
They can come here for the night or for a couple of nights till you figure out accommodations, or
yeah.
for a week or 2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
Okay.
But when we're dealing with somebody who's that's usually like a couple of nights or a couple of weeks, not like 2-3 month kind of stay,
Okay.
right?
In that situation, do you sign a lease? How would you go about that? Like with the person or
For
with
midterm,
Yeah.
or for the shorter
short
term,
term,
like getting
an
out.
abusive relationship?
No, because we'll either No, we'll either book direct through our website and get a
Okay.
credit card payment, or
Yeah.
if it's an organization we know, we'll take an e-transfer, for
Yeah.
example.
Okay.
Like there's usually a level of trust there.
Yeah.
Or, if not, something that we can kind of verify that, because every once in a while, like a new organization will reach
Yeah.
out,
Yeah, like
and then just do a little bit of homework and verify that they're
Yeah, it's
actually legit,
legitimate.
and this
Yeah.
person has a LinkedIn profile that they work there, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, but yeah, for midterm, I cannot really think of a good example why our renter would want to leave a $2,000 a month apartment and come into a $4,000 a month apartment, even for just 2 or 3 months. So, why did you get kicked out, or
Yeah.
what happened? B, are you going to be able to actually pay the rent?
Yeah.
Maybe if you got your deposit back from the last place,
Then
or you didn't have to pay the last month, you can do first and last. So that would cover the first month, and typically we're just getting 1 month, maybe with a security deposit.
Yeah.
So, but maybe you can scrape up that money for the first month. But then I know when it comes time for the second month for you to pay the rent, you're not going to have it,
Right.
right? So I don't want to put somebody in that position, even if they're dumb enough to put themselves in that position.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are desperate
Yeah.
and they need somewhere to go, and they'll just take anything now and then deal with the consequences later, which
Yeah.
is usually how they got into the situation in the first place,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to a train wreck coming into one of my properties, or a property that I manage for someone else, because that's irresponsible of me. If you trust me with your property,
Yeah.
and yep, we're going to take good care of you, Brent, and get good tenants in, and then I'm just accepting whoever, and oh, Brent, sorry, you're not getting any rent this month, and
Yeah.
you need to pay for paralegal to get this person evicted, right?
Yeah.
That's
That's irresponsible.
bad stewardship.
Yeah.
So that is the biggest category of tenant that you don't want, and that's why I
But you
I
had
kinda
three
draw that
things, and
line.
you said A, B, and C, and I forget what C was.
Did I?
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, the line that we kind of usually make is homeowners or future homeowners or prospective homeowners.
No, but you
versus
said for
tenants.
so for renters who are renting, okay, first of all, why? Secondly, are you going to be able to pay? And thirdly,
Was there a third?
I don't know. I feel like it's the reason to leave. Where are you going to go after that? That's
Oh,
what
yeah,
jumped
okay.
into my head was,
Yeah.
why are you coming here in the first place? Are you going to be able to pay? And then where are you going to go at?
Yeah. Do you have an exit plan?
Yeah.
Right? Just evaluating a business or something. What is
Yeah.
your exit plan?
yeah.
And for
Do you have
most,
another place lined up that's just, yeah.
yeah. Do you have a home to go back to? No. Okay. And where are you going to go? Do you have
Yeah.
another place?
Yeah. I can see how this midterm rental's going to turn into a long-term rental pretty quick.
Exactly. So
Okay.
we do have somebody who is actually a landlord that is putting their tenant up in one of our places,
Right.
because I think they had a flood.
Yeah.
And but that's legit. And the landlord checks
Yeah.
out, and tenant kind of checks out, and so yeah, okay, that's cool. But again, there's a reason to leave, because
Yeah.
they're paying extra money compared to
Yeah.
regular rent.
But in that
And they have an exit
situation,
plan. They're going back to the place that's being fixed.
right? Is that in that situation? Is the landlord paying you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our lease is with the landlord,
Yeah.
and with the allowance that they can sublet it. Because
Okay.
technically that's kind of what they're doing, right?
Right.
Presumably
So, yeah.
their tenant is still paying them rent.
Yeah.
Just
It's like an employer sending
Yeah.
an employee, and they want to
Yeah.
pay for it.
yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
And some people will be very picky and be like, okay, I want to know everybody that's coming into the place, and I need their ID, and I need whatever else, right? We don't typically do that.
Yeah.
As long as we kind of know the employer or the landlord or whatever, and can verify that they're legit. But that's an approach that some people will take as well. And it's, do your homework.
Verify that they're legit.
Yes.
I thought I was past homework stage, but maybe I got to get back into it.
Oh, no. Always homework, Brent. Always.
Okay.
So, and I mentioned, or I got into this a little bit and got off track earlier, but
You did?
as
I didn't
far
notice.
as it's the first time it's happened.
Yeah. Nice.
No, but with the different tenant or different guest profile, this lends itself to a little bit more of direct marketing, right? So
Okay.
you're not as reliant on Airbnb or some of these other platforms, right? So now you can market directly to employers, for example, right? Find out, like, is there a big project happening in this city?
Yeah.
Okay, who's got the contract for that or contracts for it? And this is what we're doing in the States, right?
Right.
Major plant being built. I know there's a ton of demand. There's no hotels. They need to put up, their contractors need to live somewhere. They're all living in RVs right now.
Yeah.
So I just need to do a little bit of marketing, find companies and be like, hey, we got a place for your employees to stay. So you can do that with a midterm rental anywhere that there's some kind of economic activity. If it's a major city with a head office, pursue them,
Right.
right? And then you can also do like Facebook ads in, like a renovation group or something like that. Like, hey, do you need somewhere to stay while you're doing your renos?
Right.
Also, talk to contractors in the who's like work in your area. Like, hey, if you need to place or you need to
Yeah.
kick somebody out for a while, send them our way. Right? There's just you
Yeah.
can market to all these groups. The immigrants is a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Unless you know that there's like this isn't something we have pursued, but I've thought about it. Right? If I know I'm getting a lot of people from Nigeria,
Yeah.
then maybe I can do some kind of marketing, either on
Yeah.
like
Call up the Nigerian government, get some billboards.
No, they don't want
Come
they don't want
stay
to
with-
lose people because typically these are like business people who are leaving, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Not the government, but other organizations or even like Facebook ads targeted at them,
Right.
like whatever it is, right? Find that niche and market to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's options there for marketing that lend themselves.
Do
well
you
to.
still put midterm rentals on Airbnb?
Yeah, it's probably
Yeah?
our biggest source of leads for midterm rentals.
Okay.
Right, we'll use.
But do you specify that you have to book X number of days? Like you have
Yeah.
to book 30 days plus for this particular property.
Yeah,
And then otherwise they can't book for a week or 2
Yeah.
weeks.
yeah, and so this is a strategy, right? Midterm rentals now it's actually like an actual strategy. People have recognized this that you can do. So in Toronto, for example, right, unless you are the principal occupant of a property, you cannot use it as a short-term rental and market it as such. And even if
Right.
you did, you could only do it for 180 days out of the year. So, and there's more jurisdictions like that. So a viable alternative is a midterm rental because that is longer than 28 days.
Yeah.
And like you can't even list a property in Toronto for
Yeah.
less than 28 days, like on the platform. It physically
won't allow you.
It won't allow you, right? Sometimes you want to fill in a day or two here and there, and that's been a strategy we've used. But tried it a while ago, and it physically won't let you unless you have the license in your Airbnb profile.
Okay.
So yeah, it's definitely 28 days or less, or more. Sorry,
Yeah.
in that case. But this is we're seeing investors now either buying or changing, from long term to midterm in some of these areas as a viable strategy, and it works out. So we just placed a Ukrainian family
Yeah.
in a place for I think it's maybe it's 2 months or something. But it's just kind of cool to hear those stories, right? And they're like, yeah, we're having such a hard time finding somewhere to stay for like longer than 2 weeks because
Right.
nobody wants to rent to us for that long.
Right.
And so there's still, even among folks on like the Airbnb platform and some of these other ones, a lot of people are absolutely terrified to rent their place for the longer than 28 days because they're worried they're going to squat. Right. And it's like, well, if you consider all the hoops they've had to jump through and the money they're paying, like it's not very likely.
Yeah.
But that's fine because it's more guests for
Tenants
me.
for you. Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say we've had some Ukrainian families just in the last while, obviously with what's going on, reach out, and we have one now staying with us, and they've been amazing, right? Because they displaced from their homes, kind of like you talked about with immigrants. Like they have a job, they have they have money, they have a home. They're responsible people, and they need a place. And in this situation for us, like they wanted something for the foreseeable future, like for a year, 2 years.
Yeah.
And they were prepared to buy their own furniture. Like they didn't want to stay in an Airbnb or something that's catered to them. They wanted to kind of settle in a little bit, and it's interesting.
And the attitudes often are different too, right? Here in Ontario and Canada, you've got this sort of adversarial relationship between tenants and landlords.
Yeah.
And where it's like, just try to get an edge on the other party any way you can,
it's
right?
Like, I'm going to gyp this guy out of something.
Yeah, exactly. But, we find that with a lot of immigrants, there is not that. They're just happy to be here.
Yeah.
And they're happy that, like, oh, wow, this is a really nice place.
Yeah.
And, like, okay, there's no rats. There's no gang with guns trying to rob me. Like, it's secure. They're just happy to be there and deal with somebody honest. So
so like compared to what, right? Because if in their situation, like their living situation might have been very poor, and then coming here, it's like, wow, what a night and day difference. The safety and security here.
Absolutely.
Okay, is there anything else about tenant screening specifically for midterm? In terms of the process, so we kind of identified these tenant groups and the ways to market to them. But it sounds like you're not doing all your marketing on Airbnb per se, and you're trying to market directly to employers, to contractors, whoever it is. So what's the next step when someone reaches out and you got to actually screen these people? Like you said, homework.
Yep.
But like, is there any more due diligence that people can do or should do? Is there things that you shouldn't ask or say that might backfire on you as a landlord, like legally?
Well, again, you got to set the stage here, set the tone. You're not a landlord; you're a host.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So that means, no questions are off limits as far as I'm concerned. Other than normal human interaction, right? Like, hey, you single? Probably shouldn't ask that. But I've heard stories. Okay.
Oh man.
But no, you're going to be signing a non-standard lease, a commercial lease. You set the expectation that you don't say it, but like I can kick you out at any time if you don't behave.
Implied.
It's implied. You're getting a deposit. And in a lot of cases, again, with new immigrants, like I said, you can't do a very extensive background check, but you can do a background check on somebody if they're going to be staying with you for 3 months.
Yeah.
Just be like, look, I need to do some things. And so in that respect, it's more like when you're doing long-term screening, right? You can, if you use like Single Key or Rentify or Neighborly or one of these things, you can run them through that platform, whether you do it or the platform does it, where they'll do, like bank record checks and
those
check.
That you just listed, those are just like online tenant screening platforms.
There's a few out there, but those are the more popular ones, I guess. Right. So again, the credit check, bank check, employment check. So we will verify employment, right?
Yeah. Do you ever call references or call like? I guess there's not really a previous landlord or...
Yeah, that one's a little bit tougher, right? That's why you're doing the
You're a homeowner renovating your house, and I'm going to be calling your...
You're a landlord from 23 years ago, right? Like, are your neighbors like you?
Call your neighbors,
Yeah.
This guy, I don't like this guy.
So, if you want to get a
He's
reference...
renovating his house, and he's making it way...
you call up the contractor. What's the value of your contract? No. Not the reference one, but that's why I like the employment one. Certainly, again, go through Canly.
Yeah.
Check social media to see, are there
Call
lots
Mark.
of pictures of AK-47s and, that kind of stuff. Like,
Hey, if there's pictures of stacks of cash, maybe it's all right. I don't know.
Maybe, I'll pay the rent, right?
As long as they're like US dollars and not like whatever other currency that's completely devalued. Maybe that's what we got to talk about in the next episode. Is
Well, just wait till the 9th, I think, and maybe the U.S. will be
that's the debt ceiling?
completely devalued as well. I think it's the last repayment for a large series of
Debt, okay.
bonds.
Oh boy,
And, yeah. Anyways, it's
buckle up.
a little bit off topic.
Yeah,
Look, they're just going to print more money
yeah.
at the end of the day.
What other option do they have?
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing.
They're going to do the political gamesmanship, and then at the end of the day, like, well, let's put more money into the economy. So, hey, what happens to asset prices?
Yeah.
Going to go up.
All right. So we got to buy assets and midterm rent them,
I mean,
or short or long, but midterm
well,
what we're talking
yeah,
about.
if you're looking at it from this perspective, it doesn't matter what you do because the value is going to go, the value of the dollars that they're denominated in is going to go down. And
the house is not going to go
yeah,
down. Okay.
probably so. But yeah, get some cash flow in those useless fiat dollars while you can. Okay, you can buy assets with that cash. But yeah, to sort of answer with the the screening process, because we haven't actually spent a ton of time on that, but it is similar again to the long term, the short term. Like, do your homework, get your unit set up properly for the type of guests that you want to attract.
Yeah.
And then, if you attract other guests, that's fine. But, market it towards them, build it for them. And then when you get them in, you can do a little more stringent verification along the lines of long-term rental. So, yeah.
Do you ever conduct an interview with the people? Like, I know with short term, it's kind of like you can just message them back and forth through the Airbnb platform. Like for long term, what we're doing, whenever somebody applies or even reaches out and tries to ask if they could book a showing, we book a showing and then we end up, really having a great conversation and learning a little bit about them. And then, after you leave that showing, then you get all their application, you get their information, and then you can really see if the two line up, right? You can say, oh, well, I met this guy in person. He said he had a good job. He said he worked as a chef, blah, blah, blah. And I got his application. And like, I don't know if he's a chef. He looks like he just started a part-time gig doing this, like over here. And then you can start putting some dots together and really you get the full picture, right? But with midterm, is there any avenues, like, do you guys ever explore that where you're interviewing a potential person? I guess sometimes you're dealing with like a third party, like an employer or a contractor or something, but
Yeah. Again, all the same things, maybe not all the same things, but a lot of the same things you would do for a long term, like you just talked about doing an interview, like maybe not as hardcore because they're there for 3 months.
right.
Like if everything works.
But you're
out.
not
Or a
necessarily
month.
meeting them in person.
Not
before.
always. We're generally going to sign a. So if it's through Airbnb,
Yeah.
not necessarily.
Right.
Right. If we're doing like a direct booking, then yeah, we're gonna meet them to sign the lease, and
Right.
sometimes that's the day of possession, or a couple days before we sign the lease, get their deposit and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, there's room. Like you can operate as you feel comfortable, but usually you try and do the work beforehand to get all that information, so that if any of those red flags come up, because you're talking to them back and forth through the whole process, right? And often there's like some scheduling and like it'll change a little bit, and you're back and forth, so you have the opportunity to interact with them through that time period.
Okay, and at the end of the day, you're kind of just trusting your instincts and making a final decision. I guess all of that, like you do all this verification, and like we've talked about long-term, mid-term, short-term, like at the end of the day, like it is a risk and you have to make a decision at some point, right?
Yeah, even with all the verification that you do, right? And we've had tenants surprise us where both ways, where they like seemed on the long-term side, they seemed really good, and then they turned out to be not that great.
Right.
And then other ones that were like borderline, and they turned out to be like fantastic tenants.
Right.
So you can't.
They left all kinds of beer cans.
I made $13.
Oh, We got to make like a mock website for this and
Okay,
start promoting. Let's see what happens. Is there anything else that we can touch on in terms of tenant screening for midterm specifically? Like, I'm unfamiliar with all the concept, definitely compared to you, but
Yeah, no, I think we covered most of it. I mean, have that lease. So whether it's the Airbnb agreement or the commercial lease, if you need to get rid of them,
have that prepared.
have something in hand so that you can talk to the police. And ideally, you just convince the police if you need to do an eviction that here's my commercial lease, and then we're going to follow these procedures.
Yeah.
If they don't, people have gone to landlord-tenant board and then provided the paperwork, and landlord-tenant board actually said, this is not our jurisdiction.
Right.
So
contact
off to the sheriff you go,
yeah.
right? And that has worked out.
And you go through the process faster, because I know the landlord-tenant board, like, it's just ages.
Well, if you have to get a hearing, you're waiting for that, right? And sometimes if the police aren't sure, and like we don't have any experience doing this, by the way. This is just sort of third hand, right?
Yeah,
but if the
Mark,
cops
every weekend he's at the landlord-tenant.
No, but if the cops aren't sure, they may defer to landlord-tenant board, and then like you can't get the sheriff won't act, and it's not advisable for you even. It depends how mad you are to go there and physically remove the occupants or change the locks, right?
Yeah, remember you're a digital nomad. Oh, we got more camera troubles. Are people even watching this, or people watch us all the time?
Well, they can just watch you, I guess.
Right.
There we go. The last term. So I do want to say, so we have had over the years, like I think 2 instances where we've had to get people to leave, and it was because we didn't follow our own rules. So one was on the short-term side.
Yeah.
It was a last-minute booking. It was local, and it was for one night. And it turned out it was a guy rented it for his daughter who was trying to detox himself, like get her to get off. I don't know what substance she was on, right? But it was just like, it was not a good experience, right? I ended up like the toilet got clogged, and I had to like pull the toilet and pull, I think it was shampoo bottles, like the little mini ones, out of the toilet. Right. And I'm like, okay, after all the other issues we had, I was like, that's it. You got to leave. Yeah. Like you're creating a disturbance. There's a whole bunch of issues. Right.
Yeah.
But like, we didn't follow our rule. So, and we got bitten by it. So, that was one. And then another one was,
and the reason you chose to not follow your rule in that situation, just so
you wanted the booking for that.
You just wanted the booking. Yeah. You need some money for that day or whatever. You thought it was a good opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like it came up, so like, okay, why not, right? This was in our own basement, actually.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah. You're causing a disturbance. I'm right upstairs. I can hear it.
I'm disturbed. And then the other one was, I think, a midterm, and again, in our own place. So, like a rental property.
Yeah.
Where we just didn't do the proper screening.
Yeah.
And we didn't get a full deposit, and then they didn't pay the rent. And
at all, like they didn't end up paying at first.
They didn't pay any additional.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Right. We had a deposit from them, but not for the full month. And we, they had some story like, oh, we're gonna. I think it was like 3 young guys, and we'll get it to you. Till eventually, I was like, okay, get out.
Yeah.
And they eventually did get out, thankfully.
But how long were they?
It was. So I think it was 3 weeks, probably a month that they were there for the whole time.
But their deposit covered part of that, or
covered most of the month, not all of it. So like it wasn't a complete loss, but it was still a bit of a loss. But again, we didn't do proper screening of the to make sure their story was correct. Didn't get a full deposit plus a little bit. There's reasons we have these rules in place. You don't follow them. Things can go wrong.
Stuff.
Yeah. But that's experience, right? Experience only comes from making mistakes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can learn from other people's mistakes. That's the best way. But
which is why you're listening to the podcast to learn from Mark's mistakes. And I'm not perfect. I make lots of mistakes.
What?
Oh. The perfect steward. Yeah. No. Yeah, definitely make lots of mistakes and make them quickly and never make them again.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I think that rounds off our series on long-term, short-term, and middle-term. It's like the Goldilocks of, yeah, look at that.
That's in our book, actually.
Is it in the book?
We said that midterm is like the Goldilocks of
Oh, yeah, by the way, everyone has
rentals.
Mark has a book. What is it called?
You, Me, and Airbnb.
Yeah, are you going to write one called Airbnb Beard? Or
Maybe. I gotta work on that. Work on the Instagram profile a little bit more, but
okay.
Upcoming.
Well, yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Next time, we're going to jump into a completely different topic. So stay tuned for that. And we're happy to have you along listening to this podcast. If at any time you want to reach out, it's hello@twostewards.ca. And we'll catch you the next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.